And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello there, my friends. It's the Game Boy Geek here. Last year in 2012, many people picked Lords of Waterdeep from Wizards of the Coast to be their game of the year. And for good reason, it is a good game. Now, we spent time being an underground lord and sending agents on quests, going to the harbor, doing bad things to our opponents. It's a lot of fun. Now, this year, coming out is the expansion, Lords of Waterdeep, Scoundrels of Skullport. We're going to check this out today and see all the questions that you want to know. Is it a must-have expansion? What does it add to it? Do you really need it? Is it fun? Am I going to be bored with it in 2 minutes? Well, let's check it out. I'll show you what's new in this thing, and you can help decide for yourself, and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, first things first. One of the problems a lot of people have at Lords of Waterdeep was the box. And the way that it opened up in just sort of this weird way from just the front half of the box, and it never quite closed right. It always felt like it was going to fall open. Well, they solved this with the expansion of Scoundrels of Skullport, and the box itself is actually still the same height and still the same width, but the depth is a lot shorter because they no longer use that half box concept. So they fixed that. It will fit on the same shelf. But it is that the depth is a little bit thinner because they actually fixed the box. Now onto the inner components of the box. One of the things that this expansion gave us is a 6-player and a 6-faction called Grey Hands. It also added an extra agent for all the colors in case you were playing with 6 people. Now there's a different way to play the game. There's the normal way, and then there's the long way. The long way essentially adds 1 extra agent for what it used to be in the old game. The game comes with 2 essential different modules, one of them called Undermountain, the other one called Skullport. We're going to look at Undermountain first. Now it comes with its own separate board that gets put next to the normal board, and there's 3 additional spaces that can go here. The Grim Statue allows you to take 2 Intrigue cards, the Hall of Mirrors allows you to take 1 Any Adventure or a Fighter and a Rogue, and the Entry Well allows you to take a quest and then play an Intrigue card. It also comes with many new buildings. Now you can tell that a building is from the expansion because there's a little logo underneath the agent, and that's the logo for Undermountain. And as we can see here, it's a cost of 5. You put your agent there, and you would play 3 Intrigue cards. Another interesting one is you get 2 wizards, and then you place 1 wizard from the supply on any 1 action space, meaning any place an agent can go. The Undermountain has a lot of buildings like this where you're putting things on action spaces where people can get additional adventurers. It also comes with a lot of new quest and intrigue cards. We're going to start with the Undermountain ones here. Now this, if you remember, is from the base game. 25 points was the highest point total, I believe, on the base game. Now if we look at the new cards, again, there's a logo on the new quest cards. You can see whether it's Undermountain or Skullport. In this case, it's Undermountain. It's an Arcana, and now look at this. They've upped the stakes where the highest point totals now are 40. So this is a very interesting one where before you had to get 5 wizards and $2 for 25 points. Now you got to get 4 wizards, 3 rogues, 2 fighters, and $6 to get 40. So it raises the stakes, has some ones that are even higher that take longer to work on, some more interesting ones. Let's go through some other ones. Now here is an interesting one where you get 2 fighters, a cleric, and $2. You get $10, 10 points for a reward. Plus you get 10 additional points if you immediately return 4 more fighters. So some interesting little play there. And then another interesting one where you can, essentially take 4 of any adventurers along with a cleric and a fighter, and you get 15. And draw an intrigue for each wizard you use to complete the quest. So it just changes the quest a little bit in the Undermountain. Now on the intrigue cards, there's some interesting things here. Give 1 opponent a wizard from your tavern and score 8. Again, here for the intrigue cards, here's where the logo is. You can tell if it's from the base game or the expansion. Draw 3 intrigue cards. Each opponent draws 1. Choose 1 opponent, remove any adventurer and 2 gold from his or her tavern, but then you get to give this card to that opponent after playing it. So essentially they could play it back on you if they wanted to, which is sort of interesting. And then this last one, choose 1 opponent, remove 2, 2, or 1 and 1 from his or her tavern and place them in your tavern. So just some different things that are in the Undermountain expansion. Now moving on to the Skullport part of the expansion, here's the corruption track, which is really the heart of this. Now, as you can see, there's different corruption on here. They're placed like skulls, which is cool. They could have easily just used blue cubes like all the rest of the parts in Lords of Waterdeep, but they chose to use skulls, which I think was a cool choice. Now what happens is there's going to be quests and intrigues and buildings that when you do things, you're going to have to take some corruption. And usually they give you a pretty hefty reward, but you have to take corruption along with it. So what happens is if you take corruption, you have to start, you can see it goes from -1 all the way around up to -9. So how this works is anytime you take a corruption, you take it from the lowest one available. So I would take this run. Now if I had to take 2 more corruption, I would take these 2 from here. Let's say I had to take 2 more. I take here, you just go in order. Some cards allow you to add corruption back to the track. And if you do that, you do it in reverse order. Each of these get 3, and then you move your way back down the same reverse way that you took them up. Now, at the end of the game, when, let's say it looked like this. You look at the last place where there's no corruption, and now every corruption token that's in your tavern is worth -5 points. The last completely empty one. Some of the cards actually remove corruption completely from the game, which makes it harder to put it back. So that's essentially how corruption works. So let's look at some buildings and quests that use them. Now this is an interesting board. It comes on its own. It sits next to the real main board, kind of like the Undermountain one we showed earlier. And there's 3 additional spots. The Slaver's Market, which gives you 2 fighters, 2 rogues, but you have to take 1 corruption. Skull Island, take any 2 adventurers that you want, and you get 1 corruption. And here you get a quest, an intrigue card, $5, and you must take a corruption at the Hall of the Voice. That is just an additional board with 3 more parts. Look at some buildings, quests, and intrigue cards. Now keep in mind, there's many of these that come with the game. I'm just showing you probably some of the ones that are most interesting. Cost is 8, very expensive. But when someone goes here, they get a cleric, a fighter, a rogue, a wizard, but they have to take 1 corruption. And here you get $5 and 3 rogues, but you have to take corruption. And here you get 3 fighters and a wizard, but you have to take corruption. Let's look at some of the quests here. For example, 1 cleric, 2 fighters, 3 rogues, and $5. Your reward is 13, but you also have to take 3 corruption and put 2 face-up buildings in the Builder's Hall in play under your control at no cost. So this one gives you a lot of points and lets you put control buildings, but you have to take 3 corruption as part of the reward. And in this one, same type of thing, where we get to put it back now. So the reward here is 9, but we also get to return up to 2 corruption from your tavern back to the corruption track. So sometimes you're going to be taking it and getting stuff, and then sometimes you can complete quests that allow you to put some of it back. And typically, the quests that have corruption on them you're going to be forcing out less resources to get more points than normal, but you're taking corruption to do so. Here you have many adventurers of any kind, and you get 19 points and 3 clerks, but you have to take 4 corruption. And for the intrigue cards, here's some of the, again, there's many of them, but here's some of the more interesting ones. Each opponent with more corruption than you takes from the corruption track and places it in his her tavern. So everyone has more takes 1 corruption. Return corruption from your tavern to the corruption track. And each opponent with more corruption than you takes a corruption track and places it in his tavern. So there's all sorts of stuff on corruption during the Skullport. Now there's 6 new lords that come with the expansion. I'm just going to show you 3 of the most interesting ones. This one, at the end of the game, you score 5 for each quest you completed worth at least 10 points. At the end of the game, choose 1 quest type and you score 6 for each quest you completed of your chosen type. Very powerful. And this one we felt is the most powerful, the Xanthar. At the end of the game, you score 4 for each corruption in your tavern. We found this to be very powerful and a great character to be, because typically what happens is you could grab a lot of corruption early in the game, and then if it ended up that corruption ended up being -4 at the end of the game, let's just say, then your Xanthar getting 4 points for each corruption, essentially it's a wash. So you were able to use corruption through the whole game, but at the end of the game it didn't really cost you anything. And if it happens to go further where there may be 6, everyone else is going to be getting -6 for every corruption. And since you get 4 points for everyone, essentially you're only getting -2, where everyone else is getting -6. This was seemed to be a very powerful lord in the game. It's worth noting here that if you play with just one of the 2 expansions, you just take all of the buildings, quests, and intrigue cards and mix them in with the base game. But if you're playing with both, you have to take out a certain amount of intrigue, quest, and buildings from the base game, and then mix in all the cards from the expansion. And then you always have to play with the long game anytime that you are playing with both expansions, which essentially just adds one agent for the number of players playing. So it makes the game a little bit longer, but it allows you to add both expansions at the same time. And that's Lords of Waterdeep, Scoundrels of Skullport. All right, well, there's Scoundrels of Skullport. So what did I think? Okay, I feel the same about this expansion as I do from many expansions, which is I probably will never play the game without the expansion unless I'm playing with brand new players who have never played the game. Okay, so let's break it down. The 6-player thing, I probably will very rarely play with 6. Even when I played it with 5 beforehand, it felt so tight and so hard to move around. I don't know if I would want a 6-player. But having the gray hands, hey, that's cool. Okay, so let's break it down with the Undermountain. So with the Undermountain, by itself, it's okay. It's okay. It adds an extra board, the 3 extra spots, adding those quests. Now, having those 40-point quests is really cool. Having some of those newer intrigue cards and newer buildings does add some flavor. So if this was just this on its own, I probably would say it's probably not worth it. But adding it to everything else, I'm glad it's in there because it does sort of add an additional flavor to it. Now the Skullport section, that's really the section that really shines for this. That whole new way of doing the corruption, I just think is a cool thing because it introduces a new mechanic where, with the Undermount, it sort of added a new board, which is cool, and it just added some new things, but it didn't really change any way that, that it was played. Where the Skullport actually changes the way it's played with the corruption. Where, it's funny because we were playing it, and when people are going to those spots on the Skullport board, they're like, oh man, I want to take all these, but I know I shouldn't be doing this. I don't feel good about this. And it's funny because we joked that when you went there, it was like, we were getting corruption and we were doing corrupting things and we felt bad about it, which was kind of cool because a lot of people knocked this game for not being thematic enough and we felt like we were doing something corrupted. We didn't like it. It was kind of funny in that regard. So I love the way that new corruption worked. Having the new lords really, I like that too a lot because it really added a lot of different things where it's not just, oh, well, which quest is he going to get 4 extra points for? It kind of mixed it up a lot so now you don't quite know. So I liked having the new lords. I liked having the new Skullport thing. That was great. So all in all, I'd say if you liked Waterdeep, and you probably are because you're watching this video, it's probably a no-brainer. If you've played it a lot and it's kind of drawn down a little bit on you, it's a no-brainer. You're going to like the expansion. If you have Waterdeep and you haven't played it too many times, it's not a must-have. I would probably wait maybe until you've kind of played it out to add this. If budget's are a reason, but otherwise I'll probably never play it without new people, and I'll always play it with both expansions. There's no reason to play it with one or the other. Now here's the one downside to this whole expansion that really angers me. When you play with both expansions, you have to take a certain amount of intrigue, quest, and buildings out of the base set, and then you shuffle everything in. Well, that's all good and great, but even at the end of your game, when you want to play again, you have to, and you don't want it to be the same exact game, you don't want to know which buildings or intrigues or quests are out from the base game. You need to separate them all out again, shuffle them up, random them out, separate them out, put them together. It takes about 15 minutes to set the game up, which to me detracts from this. That's my only downside is it really is a pain in the butt to set up. Because if you want to keep it the same, different every time, So that's my big thing. It's not easy to set up. The longer game, and you have to play with the longer game with 2 expansions, I found that, it's about 20 minutes longer, 20 to 30 minutes longer. So a typical game would last an hour. Ours lasted about, on average, about an hour and 25 with the longer game. It didn't feel longer. It does add a little bit of time to it. And, just setting it up is the biggest gripe. But other than that, if you like Waterdeep, you got to check it out because it does that corruption element. Oh, you got to check it out.
So much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.